So I've been obsessing over this thing called Bitcoin for the past 9 years, and I've never seen a setup like we're seeing today in 2025. We are seeing three catalysts collide that I think is going to change everything for the next 6 months. And if you think you're late to Bitcoin, you're going to have to pay very close attention to these three catalysts. The first catalyst that we're seeing is this global push and attack on people's savings. Just in the past month, we've got Vietnam shutting down 86 million bank accounts. We've got Thailand shutting down 3 million bank accounts. And then over in the UK, just in the past 90 days alone, they've given their tax authorities new powers to take money out of your bank account if you're just a little bit late on paying your taxes. They're also pushing through a digital ID despite there being over 3 million signatures on a petition asking the government to not introduce a digital ID. And the government still says, yeah, you know what? We don't care. We're going to move forward with it anyway. And I don't think it's any surprise that the Bank of England published a 45-page white paper titled Executing a Bail-in. And this white paper came with a little pretty 4-step framework on how that government and how their central bank is going to take everybody's money on what they call a cute little resolution weekend. But again, this isn't just a UK thing. This idea of digital IDs, more control over our freedom of speech, and more control over our money, this is going global. So we've got digital IDs being pushed through in the UK, Australia, and Canada. And then in Europe, they just recently had their central bank, the ECB, publish a white paper. And they were openly saying that there is an urgent need to channel retail savings into EU priorities and EU capital markets. And it's no surprise that they keep talking about the urgent need to create a CBDC. And again, just recently they came out and said they're going to be accelerating their plans to implement a CBDC because of America's most recent stablecoin law. We're going to be talking about this stablecoin law in the third catalyst. I don't want to get into that can of worms just yet. What I'm trying to paint for you guys is the picture of a global push and a global attack on the people's savings. Again, CBDCs have been used in China to freeze people's bank accounts. They come with expiration dates, meaning if you don't spend your money, then your savings can be confiscated or they just simply expire. That's a little bit of a nicer word than confiscate, don't you think? Expire. And again, I just don't think it's a coincidence that 95% of the globe's countries are looking at implementing a CBDC. And again, I've been saying from this channel for 5 years, it's not a popular opinion, but I think 2020 was when the government got their foot in the door. The amount of liberties, the amount of freedom, the amount of control that we lost as citizens in 2020, it set a precedent. And I just think what we've seen since then is a global push to steal your savings. And I think that day is coming much quicker than you might think. If you have a look at the dominoes and how quickly they're falling in the UK and Europe over the past 90 days, it's insane. We've even got the commissioner of the European Union openly saying that they're going to liquidate private capital and push it into EU priorities. This is her real Twitter account, believe it or not. So this is the big first catalyst that I think we're seeing develop in Bitcoin that we've never seen. I haven't seen in my 9 years being in Bitcoin. Again, back in 2013, Cyprus froze everybody's bank accounts, and that obviously triggered a little bit of a bull run in the Bitcoin price. Then in 2015, 2016, there was that Greek bailout crisis and fears as Europe continued to go through that debt crisis. And again, these were small catalysts for Bitcoin. But what we're seeing now is this global push and global attack on people's savings. And I think that this is going to trigger where, for example, you're in a movie theater, somebody yells fire, you see a little bit of smoke, and everybody runs for the doors. But because there's hundreds of people in the movie theater and the doors are this thin, everybody can't get out. It's as simple as that. I think we're going to see the same thing set up. I don't know if it's going to happen in the next 6 months with Bitcoin. I think the other two catalysts are a little bit more timely, but definitely in the next 6 to 18 months, you're going to see a wave of retail FOMO into Bitcoin, and they won't be buying Bitcoin because it's a nice to have. They're not going to be buying Bitcoin to flip it for a Lambo like they were in 2017. They're going to buy Bitcoin because it's a need, not a want. It's a very big differentiation. And we're going to see that very soon when we see more and more of these bank accounts frozen. So that's the first reason, and that's the first catalyst that I'm seeing that we've never seen before in Bitcoin's life. Not to the magnitude that I think we're seeing right now. We're going to see unprecedented retail demand for Bitcoin. And now the second catalyst that I see developing is unprecedented big institutional money demand for Bitcoin. Again, this isn't speculation. This isn't, oh, I think this might happen in 6 to 18 months. This is happening now. We can see that the ETFs hold more than 1 million Bitcoin. That's 5% of the supply. We can see that public and private companies have also accumulated over 1 million Bitcoin. And the majority of this has been bought in the past 24 months. So that's 10% of the Bitcoin supply completely ripped off the market. We also know that nation states are sitting on somewhere around 600,000 coins. It's another 3% of the supply. And it is rumored that somewhere around 4 to 5 million of the total Bitcoin supply is lost forever. So let's do some quick maths here. My quick maths would tell me that somewhere around 7.5 million Bitcoin is in pretty strong hands, or it's unlikely to move for a long time. Again, why do I say that? I think a lot of the Bitcoin held by MicroStrategy and all these public and private companies, they're in the hands of people who are not selling. Again, that's not speculation. You can see in this little list and this little column of all of the public companies who hold Bitcoin, you can see most of the charts only go up and to the right. It's very rare that some of the biggest Bitcoin companies and publicly traded companies that hold Bitcoin in the balance sheet are selling their Bitcoin. You can see it in the trend. It's very clear. Less than 10% of them are selling their coins. So I just think what we're going to see is governments are going to continue buying Bitcoin. They're not going to be selling it. Public corporations are going to keep buying Bitcoin. They're not going to be selling it. And it's the same with the billionaires, the nation states. So I just think right now we've got over 35% of the Bitcoin supply that I don't think will hit the market irrespective of what price we see. Now, again, I get it. Everybody gets a price. People get triggered when I say there's going to be zero Bitcoin on the exchanges in the future. And again, what I'm saying here is not that nobody will ever sell Bitcoin. Of course, people sell Bitcoin. Everybody's got their price. Even governments have their price. Like, look at the Kingdom of Bhutan. They recently sold a little bit of Bitcoin recently, but they just sold like 5% of their position, just a little bit of liquidity. And again, I think some of these early Bitcoin treasury companies, they could sell just a little bit of Bitcoin, maybe at 1 million and 5 million, 10 million. I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but what I am saying when I say there's going to be zero Bitcoin on the exchanges is the amount of demand of a massive entity or a massive nation state wanting to buy Bitcoin will greatly diminish the seller. Yeah, there'll be some hodlers selling a couple of coins or a couple of hundred coins when Bitcoin hits $1 million or $10 million a coin. But what I'm saying is the buyer on the other side of that transaction, they're going to completely diminish the seller. So again, I think the second big catalyst that we're seeing develop, and we haven't really seen this catalyst develop and accelerate in a fully fledged Bitcoin bull run, is the institutional big money demand for Bitcoin. So do you guys see what we're kind of painting here? I've painted a scenario for where we might see unprecedented retail demand for Bitcoin. That was our first reason. The second reason, we're already seeing it. We've got unprecedented big money demand for Bitcoin. But what's the third catalyst? Of course, we're talking about the supply side of the equation. Again, this is something else that I don't know why, but I get attacked for talking about the supply shock. And when you look at the data, it's so clear that we're seeing a supply shock. We've seen 1.5 million Bitcoin leave the exchanges over the past 5 years. And people still say, Luke, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Look at the data. We can see that over 1 million Bitcoin have left the spot exchanges since 2020. There was 3 million Bitcoin on the spot exchanges in 2020. Since then, we've seen 1 million Bitcoin just disappear, gone. It's moved to the hands of hodlers who aren't selling their Bitcoin. And that's 35% of all of the available Bitcoin on spot exchanges disappear. And we've seen something similar on the OTC desks. This is the over-the-counter desks. These are the desks that the massive whales use to buy and sell Bitcoin because they get a better price and a better entry price, and they affect the price less of Bitcoin if they use the over-the-counter desks as opposed to the spot exchanges. And we've seen the amount of supply on the OTC desks shrink from around 600,000 coins 3 years ago to today, it's around 150,000 coins. So you just do the maths. We've seen 1.5 million Bitcoin leave the exchanges over the past 3 to 4 years. And again, I'm just saying, look, I think this trend's going to continue. If you extrapolate out the data, we got no Bitcoin on exchanges by about 2028, 2029, depending upon whether these trends accelerate or remain at the same trend. I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to say 2029. So again, I think it all just comes down to simple supply and demand economics. What does this mean for Bitcoin? Okay. I've been in Bitcoin 9 years. I watched the 2017 bull run. I watched the 2021 bull run. They got cut in half and it got cut short early because of that China Bitcoin mining ban and all of the energy hysteria that popped up in 2021. I kind of think that was a little bit of a concerted effort to put a little bit of a suppressor on the price of Bitcoin and allow Wall Street and these massive asset managers like BlackRock to roll out the red tape for all of their clients, accumulate Bitcoin while it was cheap. And again, it's not speculation. Look at what BlackRock's done over the past 3 to 4 years. Look at what all the biggest banks have done. JP Morgan's gone from hating it to buying it. My thesis is that we haven't seen a real bull run since 2017. I think the 2021 bull run was not a real bull run. And for me, the big warning that I'm putting out there is I firmly believe this idea of diminishing returns, it's not only dangerous, I think it's wrong. And this idea of a power law, it's going to get a lot of people in a lot of danger. I think a lot of people are going to sell Bitcoin far too soon because they believe that we're seeing diminishing returns. And just when you zoom out and you understand what Bitcoin and money and technology is, the idea of diminishing returns or a power law just doesn't make any sense when you understand first principles. Again, Bitcoin's got a total addressable market cap of $900 trillion. Today, Bitcoin is at $2.5 trillion. Again, I don't know how big Bitcoin's going to be in the future. I don't know how big you guys think Bitcoin's going to be in the future. But even if we're conservative here, we know that when superior technology comes along, it completely obsoletes prior technology. Look at how quickly the automobile displaced horses in the early 1900s. It was a complete 100 to 0 takeover in under 15 years, okay? When better technology comes along, it obsoletes prior. That's why I'm looking at lights right now and not candles. Thank you, Thomas Edison. How many people still use candles today? 0.01%, okay? So when you understand technology, and when a better technology comes along, it completely takes over the prior technology. The same is true for money. Have a look at all of the monetary transitions we've gone through in history. It's an all or nothing event. Whenever you upgrade your monetary standard, all of the new capital flows into the better savings vehicle. So again, Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is a technology. History would tell us that we should see a 100% takeover of Bitcoin attacking that $900 trillion of wealth in the world. But even if you're conservative and you say, okay, real estate's still going to have value. I'm not arguing with that. Real estate will still have utility value. We're still probably going to have publicly traded companies and a stock market. I agree with all of that. My big disagreement here is that these markets have been grossly over monetized. They're grossly overvalued. I wrote an article in 2021 showing just how much of a monetary premium is in each of these buckets. My conclusion, there's about $70 trillion of a monetary premium in the equity market. There's about a $250 trillion monetary premium in the real estate market. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars of monetary premium stored in cash and bonds. And when you run the numbers, it's really hard to say that Bitcoin shouldn't be worth 100, 200, 3, or even $400 trillion per coin when you understand money, history, and technology. But even if you're conservative, let's say you think Bitcoin should only be worth $100 trillion for some reason. I don't know what that reasoning is. I think 100 trillion is incredibly bearish. But even if you believe that, Bitcoin's worth $2.5 trillion today. It's 16 years old. So for you to believe in diminishing returns, you are saying that it's going to take us another 16 years to get to $5 trillion and another 30 years to get to $10 trillion. You're saying it's going to take us 60 years to overtake gold. That is what diminishing returns is saying. Again, a power law is slightly more bullish, but I still think it is grossly underestimating and not understanding how technologies get adopted. So again, these three massive catalysts colliding today, I think will probably be the inflection point on Bitcoin's S-curve adoption chart. Again, and I don't have time to talk about the differences and why we're going to see two different adoption curves for Bitcoin. I believe we're going to see a store of value adoption curve that happens first. Then we're going to see a medium of exchange adoption curve come after that. I don't have enough time to talk about that in today's video, but I think this is hugely misunderstood by most people. Most people don't appreciate how scarce Bitcoin is. Most people don't even understand today that 0.1 Bitcoin could be generational wealth. It still boggles my mind, but I got attacked on Twitter earlier today for saying 0.1 Bitcoin is generational wealth. And I just don't think people have run the numbers. Let's think about this. Very simple example. 21 million Bitcoin in the world. What happens if we wanted to give everybody 0.1 Bitcoin? Well, let's divide that 21 million Bitcoin up equally, and all of a sudden only 210 million people could hold 0.1 of these. And again, I think maybe it's the maths or maybe it's the fact that we're using big numbers that people can't conceptualize what we're saying, which is why I'm going to continue making videos on this topic. But just think about this for a moment. There's 8 billion people in the planet. If only 210 million people could hold 0.1 Bitcoin, well, that's essentially the top 2% when you run the numbers. And we all know that Bitcoin's not distributed evenly. We all know it's impossible to distribute 210 million people with 0.1 Bitcoin. So I don't think it's hyperbolic. I think it's kind of just rational economic sense to say 0.1 Bitcoin will be generational wealth. It's as simple as that. Nobody understands scarcity. If you want to learn a little bit more about just how much Bitcoin you need, I'm going to put a recent deep dive that I did up on screen. And if you click on the link somewhere around there, it's going to take you straight to that one. But with all that said, hope you enjoyed that video and let me know down below what you thought of this one. See you all in the next one.